I claim that the concept of trust is having an existential crisis. Voters are questioning the politicians, and politicians are questioning Silicon Valley. We don't trust that our personal data is safe, and increasingly are questioning how safe our kids are in the school. We are skeptical about what we are exposed for on our social channels and have almost the same doubts about what we read in the media. Yet, we all know that trust is the underlying foundation for a functional society. No trust, no democracy. So, what about companies and their leaders? Do we trust them? Are they as tainted by the same doubtful image as the rest of the world seem to be affected by today? That is the topic of today, and our two guests won't let you down, at least if you'd like to be reintroduced to trust as a key component in your company. Let's kick off the M&M show. Hey everyone, welcome to all our viewers across the world, our World Business Forum audience, and all our Chief Executive Magazine readers. I'm Martin Lindstrom, your co-host, along with my dear friend, Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 leadership coach in the world. Now, Marshall is a member of Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame, which is an indication of that he is not 20 anymore, and he's written some of the most iconic books out there, including his latest bestseller, The Earned Life: Lose Regret, Choose Fulfillment. And it's absolutely amazing. Marshall, it is an honor once again to do this show with you. Thank you for joining us.
I am so proud to be here with my good friend and comrade, Martin Lindstrom. I love this guy. A few comments. One, he is the world's most interesting human being. If you ever get a chance to meet this guy, he's the world's most interesting human being. He is an incredible author. He wrote things like Biology, The Ministry of Common Sense. He is also a Thinkers 50 top management thinker in the world, although not quite old enough to be in the Hall of Fame yet, but he is in the Thinkers 50 top management thinkers in the world. He was ranked in Time magazine as one of the 50 most influential people in the world as well. And so he is a wonderful guy, but also beyond all of that, he's a good guy. He's always willing to help out with charities, good causes. So honored to be here with my comrade, Martin Lindstrom.
Marshall, you make me blush as always. And I want to be old so I can try that Hall of Fame experience of yours, right? Listen, if you guys have any comments, just write them down here. And if you like this show, by the way, don't forget to press the like, the follow, or the subscribe button. Marshall, I am really excited about today's guest because he's a bit of an icon out there. Tell me more about him.
Well, my good comrade coming up next is Stephen M. R. Covey. Stephen is a good guy, number one, which is kind of more important than all this other stuff. He is a New York Times best-selling author of one of the world's most iconic books, also The Speed of Trust, which has sold 2 million copies, been translated into 22 different languages, and now he has a new book coming out. A new book that just came out, Trust and Inspire. And this is about how the greatest leaders in the world unleash greatness in other people. He is also, among other things, just one of the best speakers out there. So he's a great teacher, he's a great speaker, he is also a great thinker and a great guy.
Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marshall. I appreciate those kind words, and I'm excited, delighted to be with you and with Martin on the M&M show. What an honor.
Let's get rolling. One of the first questions I have for you is looking at the concept of leadership. How is that leader of the future going to be different than the leader of the past? What are some of the most important qualities of the leader of the future?
Yeah, this is a critical question because the world has changed, and yet our style of leadership has not kept pace with this changing world. Too many of us are still kind of operating out of the old model of leadership, a command and control style that's become a better version of it, a more enlightened command and control. But as you like to say, Martin, as you like to say, Marshall, what got us here won't get us there. The same thing in leadership. What got us here, maybe the old model, the old style of leadership won't get us there. The new way to lead is what I call trust and inspire. And it's all about modeling, trusting, and inspiring. See, today people don't want to be managed. They want to be led. They want to be trusted. They want to be inspired. And this is the new way to lead in a new world of work. If we stay trapped in the old model, then our results will be diminished, will become less and less relevant, and we won't unleash the greatness, the potential in our people. But if we elevate our leadership to a whole new way of leading, where we think in terms of, I have a job with a trust to model the behavior, to extend trust to people, and to inspire by connecting with people, connecting to purpose, that will unleash the greatness, the potential that's inside of our people and of our organizations.
Marshall, I'll tell you one thing. I could listen to Steve forever. That voice, just that voice, like, it's so authoritative. Stephen, I have to ask you a question because you've written so many books about trust. I mean, you're probably the author I know who's written the most books about the topic. What do you do when you join a company as a CEO? How do you immediately build trust in this world where trust is non-existing?
I would say this, I'd say, go first. Be the first to extend that trust. Too often, the default is that we start with distrust, especially in a low trust world, like you were saying at the start, Martin, that where there's an existential crisis of trust around us. That distrust can become contagious. So if you come in as a new leader, if you start with trust, what a difference that makes. So I look at the example of that when David Novak, he became the CEO of Yum Brands, that operates all over the world, KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, all these stores. When he first took it on the role as the president of KFC, he came in, they were a little bit broken. There was distrust between the franchisees and the home office corporate. And he came in and he said, look, my first act of leadership is very clear. We're going to trust our franchisees. And the people around him said, whoa, they're the problem. You can't trust them. That's why we're trapped in this cycle of distrust. Because no, these are good people that invested in many cases their entire life savings, and we're going to believe in them. We're going to trust them as a starting point. And by him going first, not only being trustworthy, but being trusting, people responded back in kind, and they rose to the occasion. They were inspired by it. They performed better. They more creative, more innovative, and they reciprocated and gave the trust back to him. And he transformed the organization from low trust to high trust and unleashed the capabilities, the potential. He goes on to become the CEO of the entire operation, Yum Brands. It's just a great example of how being trusting first enables people to respond back in kind.
This is great. You know, one of the people I've coached who really practices what you preach in a very positive way is Hubert Joly. Hubert went into Best Buy, things were down the drain, and he just came up and he just said, he went first. He said, look, I'm trying to get better. I get feedback. I'm trying to improve. Please help me. You know, Stephen, exactly what you're saying. He didn't say I'm better than you or I'm talking down to you. Please help me. And when people saw him trying to improve, it's inspired them to try to improve. As you say, leading by example, not leading by talk. And then I want to echo what you've said. If we preach at others, all we teach them to do is preach. You know, if we live this way, then we inspire them to live that way. Can you think of maybe another great real life example of somebody who's just great at this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say Satya Nadella
Okay.
at Microsoft. And when he came in, you know, Microsoft was seen as maybe having had its best days. They were in the past. That was kind of the feeling at the time. But he came in, and through his leadership, he modeled, he trusted, he inspired. They call it model, coach, care. But he modeled, he trusted, he inspired, and literally unleashed the capabilities, the potential of the people. Today, they're, you know, a great place to work. They're a cool place to work again. They're very innovative, very creative. He's unleashed the value of the organization and of the people. He started with a growth mindset, not just for himself, but for everyone. And when you have that mentality, when that's the way you view people, then you see that your job as a leader is to try to unleash their potential, not to try to contain and control them. He modeled, he trusted, he inspired. Very similar to what David Novak did. I would also say Cheryl Batchelder, former CEO of Popeyes, turned around Popeyes under a similar basis, as same kind of leadership, a trust and inspire leader. She modeled, she trusted, she inspired, and that unleashes the capabilities, the potential of the people, and ultimately of the organization.
Do you know what I find so fascinating with what you're saying? That is that we take trust for granted, just like we take the rules in the society for granted. And I think suddenly we realize we cannot take trust for granted. I want to come back to that in a second, but coming up, because I'm going to do a little break here, our next guest will actually prove how it is possible to establish the first step leading to trust live on the M&M show. Now, we never tried this before, so I'm going to need a little bit of help to build trust online. And that leads me to the second guest of today's shows. His name is Jim Kalbach. Jim is the chief evangelist of Mural, a collaboration intelligence company supporting 95% of Fortune 100 enterprises. He's a noted author, speaker, and instructor in experience design, strategy, and visual methods, as well as a remote facilitator. Now, his personal mission, listen to this, is to make imagination work as amazing as possible in global organizations, anywhere, anytime. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Marshall, and great to be on the show with Stephen. Some great thoughts, Stephen. I'd love to dig into that even deeper.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Now, listen, we've used Mural the past 20 episodes, and during our pre-call, I asked you for a little bit of a challenge if you're able to build trust online. Now, you are up for the challenge.
Yeah.
So I know that you would like to bring in your colleague.
Yeah.
And your colleague is Mark Tippen. He's a good friend of mine as well. At least it's become that over the last 20 episodes. He's a designer for 30 years and head of best practice learning at Mural. Let's bring in Mark as well. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Rookie mistake. Muted. Great to be here, Martin.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. Listen, why don't you two show the world how we build trust online?
Right.
Yeah.
So Mark and I have been working together for over 5 years now in a remote company, but helping other companies try to build trust while they're at a distance and remote. And of course, during the pandemic, this became even more salient and prevalent to have those trust building situations. I think one of the things to keep in mind is to create the environment and the conditions under which trust can happen. You can do this on a grand scale, like having a retreat or a quarterly team building events. Those are good. But the way that I think we approach it is to bring in elements that can lay the foundation for trust on a regular basis in with every interaction. And one way, just one example, Martin, is with a short check-in exercise that we call affectionately Pick Your Nick. So Pick Your Nick is, and we can do this visually in Mural. Before you get started collaborating, you simply, by moving a sticky note on top of these Nicolas Cage characters, let people know which one of these sentiments you identify with before you get going, right? What that does, the effect of that is to kind of set the mood of the collaboration, to lay the groundwork for psychological safety and trust. It doesn't necessarily build trust in this one little interaction, but what it does is it opens up the group and it gives them permission to play. It removes the fear so that trust can then take hold. Now, we did this once when I was on a call with Disney. We were talking to some leaders in Disney about how they wanted to collaborate, and we changed it to Pick Your Mick. So you can think about this creatively and use different, we've done this with superheroes and cats. But I will tell you, if you go into a meeting with Disney and you have the folks from Disney do a Pick Your Mick, the nature of the conversation changes, right? It allows for trust to take hold, right? So just something little small. Again, you know, the quarterly meetings and the team building events, those are great. But what I want to encourage folks to do are these little moments that lay the foundation for trust. And we're going to do it right here, I think, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. So we've cooked up something special. We watched your intro video and we found wonderful expressions of Martin and Marshall in different states of mind. And we've built a Pick Your M&M. So
You're not indicating we're schizophrenic, are you here?
no. You have a broad range. So we've set things up beforehand. We found out your favorite colors, and so we've color coded things, which is also a great way in these virtual collaboration spaces to keep track of whose sentiment is what throughout the activities. But I'd like to invite you to look through these, and we have excited to be here, ready for action. Is it nap time yet? Right. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of select in. Martin, what's your state of mind?
I'll tell you what it is. There's no doubt about it. Whenever I am with Marshall, I am 100% focused. So you better place me on top of Marshall being focused here.
Got it. So Martin's focused, and we got your black color. So
thank you for that, Mark.
That tidy black, yeah. So and as for myself, I think, you know, I have to go with this is fun.
Yeah.
You know, the 20 shows have been really fun and amazing to participate with. So
now you'll see this took about 120 seconds to do, right? So what we're saying is before a team comes together and collaborates, you can take little moments like this and just understand how people are. That also helps you understand how and why they might react the way that they do. If they're having a busy day or a bad day, then that sets up the collaboration, and you're not mistrustful of them because they didn't answer because they're tired or they're busy and that kind of thing. What I typically do after we do this is I just kind of acknowledge, not one by one, but just in general. Oh, it's great to see so many people focused and excited here, right? And just acknowledge that back to the group. Again, it creates the environment, the conditions for psychological safety, empathy, being vulnerable as well too. And then I think that ultimately would lead to trust, Stephen, or the conditions under which trust can take hold.
Yeah. And
I would
Tim, I think
say
it's
as
great
a
what you're saying
facilitator,
there.
you also need to be prepared if someone's in a really awkward space or having a downtime. That's a signal you can follow up on too, and that's even an introduction to build more trust.
I love what you're saying because, you know, sometimes in meetings, I'm always asking people, quite often asking people, what makes you feel really at anxiety, having a sense of anxiety in a meeting? When you start meetings or sessions with these fairly deep questions, people will quite often come up with something deep, and it will send a signal to everyone else. It's okay to share emotions in this virtual space. And that's really what you're doing here with this icebreaker.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know, Marshall, you have a question.
The first thing is I just want to say thank you to these guys because we've had the privilege of working with them for quite a while now. And they've
Yeah.
done an amazing, amazing job. So the first thing I just want to say is thank you so much for just fantastic work that you're doing. And then a couple thoughts. One thought I had is the idea of differences. You see, another thing I love about that exercise is we begin to get into right versus wrong when people disagree. Well, this is right, this is wrong, this is better, this is worse. And what I love about this, it's a kind of also a fun way where people can express themselves, be different, and it's okay to be different.
Mm.
It's okay to be different. Steven said, if you're in an environment where people are going to kill you for being different, everybody's going to act like robots. Nobody's going to be different.
Yeah.
And this gives you the permission and kind of a fun way to actually be different than someone else and realize that differences are not inherently bad. In fact, through differences, we can learn things. So I just love that. I just love that. Can you think of a specific, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say that is such an important point because it's not just different from each other, it's different from the past. We opened up by saying the way that you got there isn't the way that you're going to move in the future. I forget exactly how you formulated it. I find when you do things like this, it gives you permission to do things differently as well, too. So it's different from any other meeting that you've had that day, probably. It's different from the typical expectations you have around a PowerPoint presentation and bullet points. So it really does pivot the mindset. It pivots the mindset towards the future, towards something new in a way that allows for trust to take place.
And what I would add to that is that differences are our strengths when people trust each other. So when you add trust to this, then that's the source of creativity and innovation, those differences. And so Jim, this and Mark, this whole approach is just trying to be intentional, deliberate, that we can't just assume trust. We can't take it for granted. We have to work on it on purpose, intentionally building this trust as a way that we lead, the way that we operate, so that we can collaborate. Because without trust, you don't really collaborate, you just coordinate. And we want to collaborate and bring out the best in what people have. That takes trust. And high trust collaboration, so much better. Going first, being vulnerable. I love the expression around vulnerability. Think of intimacy. We want to be intimacy, but spell it into, I-N-T-O, me, see. So you let people see into you. This is what you just did here is a little peek of some intimacy into me, see, letting people see that, but we're modeling the vulnerability, going first, and people tend to reciprocate and respond in kind, and that starts to create a virtuous upward cycle of trust and confidence, creating more. Now, this is a little thing, but those little things compound and they grow, and it becomes part of how we lead with trust.
I love what you're saying. Tell me, Steve, how contagious is trust?
Extremely contagious. By the way, in either direction. Distrust
Okay, yeah.
is contagious.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of this low trust world, this existential crisis of trust you described, Martin, at the outset, is that tends to perpetuate itself. Because in a low trust world, everyone becomes a little bit more careful, cautious, guarded, because no one wants to get burned. People respond back more careful, cautious, guarded, and we can find ourselves perpetuating a vicious downward cycle of distrust and suspicion, creating more distrust and suspicion. So distrust is contagious, but so is trust. And trust and confidence can create more trust and confidence. It's David Novak, trusting first. People responding to that trust, they give it back to him. It becomes a virtuous upward spiral. And so, I think this is vital that we go first as leaders, because you could have two trustworthy people working together and yet no trust between them, even though they're both trustworthy, if neither person is willing to extend trust to the other. So in addition to being trustworthy, we need to be trusting to create trust. And when we create that trust, that can become a virtuous upward spiral. And we got to be deliberate about it, to Jim's point.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, coming up, I will claim that trust is experiencing an historic low. But is that really true? I think the answer from our guest will kind of surprise you. But before we get to the answer to that tricky statement, I think it's time for us to run the BCG Minute. Now, we ask Al Ramadan, the founder and CEO of Play Bigger and the co-author of Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Now, we ask him to share today's BCG Minute. Let's run it.
Hi, my name's Al Ramadan. I'm the CEO of Play Bigger, a category design firm based here in Silicon Valley. My question for Jim and Stephen on the M&M panel is, companies adopting hybrid working models are hesitant about very radical ways to maximize efficiency, such as asynchronous work. Yet we know that implementing best practices that revolve around transparency, trust, and asynchronous communication are the building blocks for creating a thriving remote work environment. What's your advice to managers watching who are finding it difficult to let go of old ways of working? How can managers learn to trust that their team is doing the work, even though they cannot physically see them? I really look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Who would like to start kicking this answer off? Because this is not a straightforward question, I have to say. Stephen, do you want to give it a stab?
Absolutely. I love Al's question because most of us are facing this. We have remote work, hybrid work, intentionally flexible work, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. I think, again, this comes back to we have to be intentional and deliberate about the fact that we trust our people and we're extending trust to them in a remote environment, in a hybrid environment, because it's one thing if they're not there with us. It's another thing of, do we trust them and do they feel trusted? So if you up front say, look, as we work together, we trust you. But in that process of extending the trust, you do two other things. You clarify expectations and you agree upon a process of accountability to those expectations. So you're effectively building an agreement together around the trust that's being given. And then you can be very deliberate in saying, we trust you to do this in this new work environment. And we believe in you, but you're not just doing a blind trust without expectations or accountability. No, it's a smart trust because you built an agreement together with expectations, with accountability. If you do that well up front, you can become far more trusting than you might have thought was possible. And when people feel trusted, it brings out the very best in them. They'll perform better, they rise to the occasion, they develop new capabilities, and they reciprocate and give the trust back. And right now in this new work environment, where the workplace is changing in front of our eyes, more than ever before, here's an opportunity for leaders everywhere and for organizations to build trust faster with their people by demonstrating and showing and saying to their people, we trust you. And we are extending that trust to you in this new environment. And we built the agreements together that enable us to do this in a smart way. And this is a better way to lead in this new world of work.
Well said. Listen, Marshall, you have worked with so many leaders across the world, coaching them. What is your take on trust?
Go back to what Stephen just said. Smart trust. I love the way you just said that, because to me, a guy I quote all the time, who's a hero to me, is Alan Mulally. Alan, probably the greatest corporate leader in the world in the last 30 years. He clearly believed in everything Stephen said. And I want to also reinforce one point you made, though. That is clarity and expectations. Alan was very clear. Here's behavior that is and is not acceptable. Here are expectations. And that was clear up front. Now, if you didn't want to buy into these basic values, he wasn't rude. He just said, work someplace else. Just don't work here. But these were pretty reasonable expectations. You have fun, not at other people's expense. You're open, you're honest, you don't put people down. Going back to what Stephen said, though, you do need these guardrails. People need to understand, yes, we have trust. On the other hand, I'm not trusting you to attack your colleagues. I'm not trusting you to act in inappropriate ways. So, Stephen, I really like the way you've said that, because does that make sense to you, Stephen?
Completely. It's not a blind trust of just indiscriminate, whatever you do, that's abandonment. That's not trusting. It's is building the agreement together with expectations, with an agreed upon process for accountability. And when you do that well, then you can become more trusting. And it's a better way to lead because the agreement is governing, not you having to hover over and micromanage. But it's not, again, without guardrails. It's not without expectations. That doesn't inspire anyone. No, there's expectations, there's accountability, and people respond to it and they perform better.
Well, I think we have talked about so much trust, it's not even funny, but I think we probably should try to see if we can summarize all this. So, with no further ado, I think it's time for the Mule summary. I'm always getting a little bit nervous when we have to run this Mule summary because all these guests have these amazing inputs here. But one of the things I picked up from this whole conversation is that trust means that we also are open to show our vulnerabilities up front. And when you show up these vulnerabilities, it actually builds a sense of trust because other people know that you're willing to show your weaknesses, which also invite them to show that. And that's where we build the trust. I'll go back to the model we just saw with Stephen, where we actually have the trusting of how to lead that is built into the whole, is encapsulated into how we express things to the outside world. Now, that also is going to establish sense of role model in the end of the day. And that's what we heard Alan Morley was all about. That when Alan Morley was jumping on stage, or if we take any of the other people we've heard, for example, David from Young Brands, they immediately were saying, this is the way I see the world. And that's why we talked about the accountability as well. You come and you establish a system of accountability which everyone buys into, so it's transparent and there's no sort of ambiguity. And do you know why that's so important? It's important because in this world we cannot look at each other's body language anymore. Remember, perhaps 65% of what we say every day is the body language. While in most cases, this is more or less cut away, at least right now. And that means ambiguity can become a ticking bomb of insecurity. Now, the third point, which Stephen actually pointed out, is to be a source of inspiration. And by that, it means that you actually are not basically pushing people, but you're inspiring them to see things. This is important, particularly with the millennials, because I think the issue we see with millennials today is they don't buy into companies because they make the shareholders more happy. They buy into companies because they feel this is inspiration for them, where they want to go. You know, they're just looking at the parents with have gray hair, nothing against that, but they don't want to end up like their dad working 24/7. They want to be inspired by their leaders to be different. And that is the biggest challenge I think companies have today. They're not inspiring the next generation to put them into this cookie cutter model. So this may be the summary of the model of today with trust. I guess this is trust and inspire. And this was the Mule summary, even with makeup on. Oh, Marshall. Should we, any reflection from you? Are you good?
Yeah, a couple of reflections. One, this phrase ambiguity leads to a ticking time bomb of insecurity. That was pretty poetic. So, you know, if you read it in one of my books in the future, I'm going to forget you said it, but I love it.
Perhaps you and I should write a book together, I'm thinking.
I love that one. Now, the second, I got a couple of other reflections. One, over COVID, I spent 600 hours with Mark Thompson with 60 of the most brilliant people in the world in rotating groups. And what we had is something that both of our speakers have talked about, and really a sense of people feeling accountable without being put down or judged, vulnerable without being ashamed. And, you know, they loved that. They loved it. And it's important at all levels. It's important to have in an organization. It's also important to have across organizations or with groups of CEOs who can help each other. So I just love this concept of, you know, accountability without judgment, being vulnerable, creating a trust environment and what that means. And I also love, Martin, what you said when what everybody brought up about accountability, because without that, this is a pipe dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Marshall, should we say thank you to our amazing guest, Jim Kalbach from Mural, and of course, Mark Tipping from Mural? A little bit of a person I'm a fan of, I have to say. And then, of course, Stephen Covey, which is an icon when it comes to trust. Thank you, guys, for joining us on the M&M show. And I just want to say to all of you guys that if you are curious to see some of the previous episodes, then check out martinlindstrom.com/mm/ you have to have the last slash, or by the way, scan this QR code on the screen right now, and there you will find our show notes, hundreds of free videos from our many shows, free tools, and even some free books out there. So hopefully you will meet us out there in the virtual space. By the way, next time on the next show, we'll be joined by Dr. Jim Kim. Jim Kim was the 12th president of the World Bank. And by the way, he was also coached by Marshall through many years. Um, I will have to say, listen, Marshall, tell me more about Jim because you know much more about him than I do.
Jim Kim, I just talked to him on the phone yesterday. I love this guy. He has a simultaneous MD and PhD with honors from Harvard in anthropology in 5 years. So, Martin, his IQ is equal to yours and mine combined, something along those lines. And, he's real, but he also was head of Partners in Health, and they literally saved tens of millions of human lives. So, I mean, I love Dr. Jim. He is an inspirational human being, and I'm honored to even know him.
Yeah, I mean, I can only say the same. Extraordinary person. I mean, everyone out there watching, just join us for the next show. And by the way, Kim will be joined by Thomas Eriksson. He's a Swedish behavioral expert and an active lecturer and a best-selling author. Thomas is an advisor to IKEA and Coca-Cola and Microsoft and Volvo. And he's a best-selling author of a book, listen to this title, Surrounded by Idiots. And it has become a Swedish runaway bestseller since it was first published in 2014. It actually sold 3 million copies worldwide, translated into 42 languages. So obviously we are all surrounded by a lot of idiots. So if you want to see 4 idiots on the screen very soon, well then tune in the 30th of August 2022 at 12 noon Eastern. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks, Marshall. Thanks to all our guests. Bye for now.
Every day is a new challenge, right? Is a day that we can prepare ourselves even more.
This is about leadership as a mindset.
We do work that matters for people who care.
We live in the age of the idea.